Chapter 5. Morgana stepped out of the car and into the crisp Boston evening, the air humming with the promise of power and possibility. The women's dinner was being held at a private club nestled in Beacon Hill, a place where the elite of Boston gathered behind closed doors to discuss philanthropy, fashion, and the world as they knew it. This was no ordinary dinner. It was a strategic meeting ground, and tonight Morgan had a plan. Beside her, Julia adjusted her coat, the hem of her velvet dress peeking out as she gave Morgan a reassuring smile. Morgan's gaze swept over the entrance, mentally preparing herself. Tonight wasn't just about meeting influential women or making small talk over champagne. It was about meeting Emma Clark, and by extension, any other person who could raise her profile. Boston was a stepping stone, and Rick was a tool she'd long since exhausted. Julia led the way into the club, exchanging smiles and greetings with the doorman as they entered the opulent space. The interior was a blend of dark wood, crystal chandeliers, and rich fabrics, the kind of environment that whispered exclusivity. Morgan took a deep breath, composing herself as they walked into the main room where the dinner was being held. The room was already buzzing with the city's most powerful women, all dressed to perfection and engaged in animated conversation. Morgan quickly scanned the crowd, her eyes landing on Emma Clark near the grand fireplace, holding a glass of white wine and speaking to a small group of admirers. Emma was striking, with a sharp bob and an air of effortless chic, the epitome of the opal and ivy brand. "This is it," Julia murmured, nudging Morgan gently. "Just be yourself, charming, elegant. Emma will love you," Morgan smiled, but her mind was already working out the details. She couldn't appear too eager. This had to seem like a casual introduction. Julia would make it happen. And once she had Emma's ear, she could start weaving her way into the circles she truly desired. They reached her just as the designer finished her conversation with someone. "Julia," Emma smiled. "How good to see you again," she said, giving her old friend a hug. Morgan had been waiting, a smile plastered on her face that she made sure radiated warmth. She watched as the two chatted for a bit, then Julia gestured beside her. "Emma, I'd like you to meet a dear friend of mine, Morgan Smith. She's an actress and has been dying to meet you. I've been telling her all about your latest collection." Emma turned, her eyes lighting up with polite curiosity as she took Morgan's hand. "Morgan, so nice to meet you. Julia always brings the most interesting people around." Morgan smiled, giving Emma a look of genuine pleasure. "Thank you, Emma. I'm a huge admirer of opal and ivy. Your designs are incredible, so sophisticated, and yet so wearable." Emma nodded appreciatively, but Morgan could tell she wasn't particularly impressed. In Emma's world, actors like her were a dime a dozen, especially those on niche shows like Ties. Morgan wasn't a household name, not yet. But that was exactly why she was here, playing the long game. "I've heard so much about your work," Morgan continued, keeping her tone light. "I'd love to learn more about what inspires your collections. They have such a unique blend of modernity and timelessness." Emma's interest heightened slightly at that. "Thank you. I do try to balance both, though it's not always easy. I'd be happy to talk more sometime." Morgan noticed Emma's gaze drift over her shoulder, a genuine smile spreading across the designer's face as she excused herself. "I'm so sorry, but I must go say hello to someone. Please, enjoy the evening, and we'll catch up later." Morgan turned slightly, just in time to see Emma walking across the room toward a striking woman who had just entered. The room seemed to shift around her as the woman, elegant in a pale green dress that set off her auburn hair, was greeted warmly by several of the guests. Morgan's ears perked up as she caught a snippet of Emma's greeting. "Daphne, it's so good to see you. How's Nathan? And how's Bash doing?" "Bash?" Morgan's heart skipped a beat. She knew that nickname, though she'd never heard it spoken aloud until now. Bash was the Sebastian Wentworth, Count of Northallerton. If Daphne Wentworth was here, then Morgan's plans for the evening had just taken an unexpected and potentially game-changing turn. But she couldn't act too quickly. She had to be patient, to wait for the right moment. She turned back to Julia, who was engrossed in conversation with another guest, and forced herself to relax. As Julia chatted animatedly about a new fashion exhibit in New York, Morgan subtly positioned herself so she could keep an eye on Emma and Daphne. They were chatting easily, their body language suggesting a long-standing friendship. Morgan knew she had to be introduced to Daphne, but it couldn't come from her directly. She needed someone else to make that connection, to ensure she didn't seem too eager. So, they waited some more until Morgan excused herself to use the restroom. Morgan slipped into the bathroom, closing the door behind her with a quiet click. The elegant space, with its marble countertops and soft ambient lighting, felt like a sanctuary compared to the bustling energy of the dinner outside. She leaned against the sink, her eyes fixed on her reflection in the mirror. The face that stared back at her was one she had perfected over the years. Flawless makeup, expertly applied, lips painted in a confident shade of red, and eyes that sparkled with ambition. But beneath that polished surface, a familiar unease stirred. She took a deep breath, willing herself to calm down. This was her night, and she couldn't afford to let her insecurities get the best of her. Yet, as much as she tried to suppress them, the doubts crept in, like shadows at the edge of her mind. Morgan closed her eyes, blocking out her reflection. "You've worked for this," she told herself. "You deserve to be here." But the voice in her head wasn't entirely convinced. Memories of years spent struggling in Hollywood flashed through her mind. Auditions that went nowhere, the countless rejections, the roles that never materialized. She had been so close to giving up so many times, wondering if she would ever make it. Even now, with her role on Ties, she knew it wasn't the breakthrough she had once dreamed of. It was a stepping stone, yes, but the real dream still felt so far away. "You're not good enough. You'll never be one of them," the cruel voice whispered. She opened her eyes, forcing herself to confront her reflection again. She had become a master at faking confidence, at playing the part of the woman who had it all together. But deep down, she knew that was all it was, a performance. And the fear that one day someone would see through it terrified her. Morgan took another deep breath, this time letting it out slowly. She had to push those thoughts away. Tonight was important, and she couldn't afford to let her insecurities sabotage her. She needed to be strong, to believe in herself, even if it was just an act. "You are powerful," she thought, staring into her own eyes. "You are worthy of success. You are capable of achieving everything you want." The affirmations felt hollow at first, like words she was just repeating out of habit. But she knew she had to keep saying them, had to keep believing them until they became true. She had done it before, faked confidence until it became real enough to get her through. She could do it again. "You've come this far. You can go further. You will go further." Slowly, she felt a sense of calm settle over her. The doubts didn't disappear entirely, but they dulled, receding to the back of her mind where they wouldn't dominate her thoughts. She was in control. She was strong. She was the woman who could walk out of this bathroom, smile, and charm her way into the circles she so desperately wanted to be part of. "This is your time," she told herself. "Don't let anything stop you." With one last look in the mirror, Morgan straightened her shoulders, adjusting her posture until she looked every bit the confident, composed woman she needed to be. She gave her reflection a small, reassuring smile. Then she turned and left the bathroom, stepping back into the world where she would continue to play the role she had crafted so carefully until one day it became her reality. Morgan exited the restroom, pausing for a moment to adjust her makeup in the gilded mirror. The evening was unfolding perfectly, but she knew she had to stay sharp. As she stepped back into the elegant hallway leading to the main event, her heels clicking softly against the polished marble floors, she noticed an older woman standing by the large window overlooking the city. The woman exuded an air of old-world elegance, her posture straight and poised, her fingers adorned with stunning rings that glinted under the soft lighting. Morgan's eyes were drawn to a particularly large emerald ring, set in an intricate band of gold and diamonds. It was the kind of piece that didn't just speak of wealth, but of history, of legacy. She recognized in that moment that this woman was someone she needed to know. Taking a deep breath, Morgan approached with a warm smile. "What a breathtaking view," she said casually, positioning herself nearby but not too close, allowing her presence to be noticed without being intrusive. The woman turned, her expression neutral but curious. She was impeccably dressed in a deep burgundy gown that complemented her silver hair, pinned back in an elegant chignon. Around her neck hung a delicate necklace with a diamond pendant that matched the intensity of her gaze. "Yes, Boston does have its charms," the woman replied, her voice carrying a refined accent. She studied Morgan for a moment before offering a slight smile. "But I must say, it's the people who make a city truly unforgettable." Morgan's instincts told her to tread carefully but confidently. "I couldn't agree more. It's wonderful to be surrounded by so many remarkable people tonight." The woman inclined her head slightly, a gesture of acknowledgement. "I don't believe we've met. I'm Evelyn Harrington." "Morgan Smith," Morgan replied, extending her hand. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Mrs. Harrington." Evelyn's grip was firm but graceful, her eyes appraising Morgan with a hint of interest. "Morgan, are you from Boston?" "No, California," Morgan said, a touch of humour in her tone. "I'm missing the sunshine every day." Evelyn's smile deepened slightly. "I understand that. And what brings you to this gathering, Miss Smith?" Morgan chose her words carefully. "I'm an actress, though I found Boston to be just as fascinating off-screen as on. Tonight, I'm here as a guest of Julia Moore. She's a wonderful stylist and a dear friend." "Ah, Julia," Evelyn nodded, as if that explained everything. "She's quite talented. Styled a friend of mine here for a gala. Recently, she's been working as a stylist on a show." "Yes, that's the show I'm on. It's called Ties," Morgan replied. "It's a wonderful experience, but I'm also quite interested in the broader world of fashion and design, which is why I was thrilled to meet Emma Clark tonight." "Emma's designs are lovely," Evelyn agreed. "She's come a long way in a relatively short time." Morgan felt the conversation was going in the right direction. She glanced at the diamond pendant, then at the rings, admiring them openly. "Your jewellery is exquisite, Mrs. Harrington. The craftsmanship is truly remarkable." Evelyn's eyes flickered with a touch of pride. "Thank you, my dear. These pieces have been in my family for generations. My grandfather was quite the collector. He had an eye for rare and unique items. In fact, he acquired several pieces from royal auctions." Morgan's interest was heightened. "That's incredible. Your family must have quite the history." "We do," Evelyn replied, her tone modest yet unmistakably proud. "Our home in the countryside is full of treasures, many with fascinating stories behind them. My grandfather was quite connected, and our family still maintains relationships with a few old friends from across the pond." Morgan's heart quickened. This was precisely the connection she needed. She allowed a hint of admiration to seep into her voice. "It must be wonderful to be surrounded by such history and to have such connections. I've always been fascinated by the stories and traditions of the British aristocracy." Evelyn studied her closely, as if weighing her sincerity. After a moment, she smiled softly. It is a privilege, certainly, but it comes with its own expectations and responsibilities. And tell me, Miss Smith, what do you find most fascinating about their traditions? Morgan knew this was a test. She leaned in slightly, lowering her voice as if sharing a secret. I think it's the way history is woven into everyday life, how traditions are passed down, not just as customs, but as a part of one's identity. It's something I admire deeply, especially in a world that moves so quickly. Evelyn's smile broadened, her eyes gleaming with approval. You have a good understanding of it. Many people think it's all about titles and appearances, but it's much more than that. It's about legacy and stewardship. Morgan nodded, genuinely intrigued. I would love to learn more about it someday. There's so much that's often hidden beneath the surface. You're quite perceptive, Miss Smith, Evelyn said, her tone warm, and if you're ever in England, I would be happy to show you around our estate there. I think you would appreciate its history. Morgan's heart leaped at the invitation. I would be honoured, Mrs. Harrington. Call me Evelyn, she replied, causing Morgan to hold back a smirk. She had her right where she wanted her. Morgan followed along as Evelyn led her back into the party, their heels clicking against the wood floors. As Daphne's conversation with Emma seemed to wrap up, Evelyn turned back to Morgan. Would you like to be introduced, my dear? I think you and Daphne might have much to talk about. Morgan's smile was radiant, but she kept her excitement carefully contained. I would love that, Evelyn. Thank you. With Evelyn at her side, Morgan felt a surge of confidence. She had navigated the evening perfectly, and now, as Evelyn led her toward Daphne, she knew she was one step closer to her ultimate goal. Daphne, darling, Evelyn's voice was warm and familiar as she stepped into the circle. It's been too long. Daphne turned, her face lighting up when she saw Evelyn. Mrs. Harrington, what a lovely surprise, she exclaimed, embracing her lightly. You're looking as radiant as ever. Evelyn smiled fondly. You're too kind, my dear. But I must say, you've certainly been making waves yourself. I was just telling Miss Smith here how fortunate we all are to be in such distinguished company tonight. Daphne's gaze shifted to Morgan, her interest piqued by the introduction. Miss Smith? Morgan offered a gracious smile, extending her hand. Morgan Smith. It's a pleasure to meet you, Miss Wentworth. Please, call me Daphne, she replied, shaking Morgan's hand with a friendly warmth. Her eyes flicked back to Evelyn, a silent acknowledgement of the older woman's endorsement. I've heard a bit about you, Morgan. Julia speaks highly of your work. Morgan knew that probably was a lie, but she let it go. Julia's been a wonderful friend and mentor. I'm so lucky to know her. Emma Clark, who had been observing the exchange with mild curiosity, now stepped forward, her interest clearly piqued by the rapport between Evelyn and Daphne. Morgan, I didn't realise you knew Mrs. Harrington, she said, her tone more respectful. Morgan nodded, her voice smooth and confident. We just met, but it feels like I've known her forever. We were talking about her family's estate in England. It sounds absolutely fascinating. Daphne chuckled lightly. Evelyn's estate is legendary. I've had the pleasure of visiting a few times. The history alone is worth the trip. It's a treasure trove, to be sure, Evelyn agreed. And I'm certain Morgan would appreciate it. She has a keen interest in history and tradition. Emma's eyes narrowed slightly, as if recalculating her opinion of Morgan. It sounds like we have more in common than I realised. Maybe we chat over drinks or dinner. Morgan's heart quickened, but she maintained her composure. I'd love that, Emma. There's so much I'd like to learn. Daphne, sensing the shift in the conversation, smiled at Morgan with renewed interest. You should come by for tea sometime, Morgan. I think you'd enjoy hearing about some of the old stories Evelyn and I could share. That would be lovely, Morgan replied, her voice steady, despite the excitement building inside her. Thank you for the invitation. Evelyn, satisfied with how things were unfolding, placed a gentle hand on Morgan's arm. It's always a pleasure to bring like-minded people together. I'm sure you'll find plenty to discuss. Morgan felt a rush of gratitude toward Evelyn. This introduction was more than just a meeting. It was a doorway into the world she had been striving to enter for so long. And with Evelyn's endorsement, Daphne and Emma were more open to her than they might have been. Otherwise, the group continued to chat, the conversation flowing easily as Morgan subtly inserted herself into the dynamic. She was careful to listen more than speak, to show her respect for the relationships already established among them. She allowed herself a small, internal smile. She had played her cards well tonight, and the rewards were beginning to show. Morgan had always been meticulous, but this was a new level of precision. The dinner had been a success. More than that, it had been a turning point. She'd left the venue that night with the names of 3 powerful women etched into her mind: Evelyn Harrington, Daphne Wentworth, and Emma Clark. Each one represented a ladder, and Morgan was determined to climb them all. The morning after dinner, Morgan sent each of them a bouquet of flowers, each carefully chosen to reflect the recipient's personality and tastes. For Evelyn, it was a bouquet of rare orchids, symbolizing her elegance and the depth of her family's legacy. Along with the flowers, she sent a handwritten note on thick, cream-coloured paper. Dear Evelyn, it was a true pleasure meeting you last night. Your grace and wisdom left a lasting impression on me. I look forward to continuing our conversation soon. Please accept these orchids as a small token of my admiration. Warm regards, Morgan Smith. To Daphne, she sent a bouquet of tulips, carnations, and baby's breath. The accompanying note was shorter, but equally thoughtful. Dear Daphne, thank you for the lovely conversation last night. I hope our paths cross again soon. In the meantime, I'd love to stay in touch through Instagram. Your travels always seem so inspiring. Best wishes, Morgan. For Emma, who she knew was constantly jet-setting from one fashion event to another, Morgan sent a bouquet of bright peonies, vibrant, just like Emma's presence in the fashion world. Her note was friendly, casual, and a bit more personal. Emma, last night was such fun. I'm so glad we finally got to connect. Let's keep in touch. I'd love to hear more about your upcoming projects and share some ideas of my own. Cheers, Morgan. With the thank you notes sent, Morgan set to work on the next phase of her plan. She created a new note in her phone, titling it Operation High Life. It was here that she would document her progress, jot down important details, and refine her strategy as she wove her web around these women. 1. Evelyn Harrington. Morgan knew Evelyn would be the most challenging to win over, given her deep connections and old-world sensibilities. But she also knew that Evelyn was a gatekeeper to a world Morgan desperately wanted to enter. The orchids had been the first step. The next was to build a genuine rapport. Every week, Morgan made sure to call her. Their conversations were always poised and respectful, with Morgan taking care to show interest in Evelyn's stories about her estate and her family's history. She'd done her homework, researching the Harrington family in detail. Whenever Evelyn mentioned a name or an event, Morgan could respond with a thoughtful question or a well-placed comment. Evelyn, for her part, began to appreciate Morgan's company more with each call. There was something refreshing about this young woman's respect for tradition, her eagerness to learn. Soon, what began as brief, polite conversations turned into longer, more engaging dialogues. Morgan would surprise her with gifts of vegan cookies that she'd have mailed to her home and encouraging letters, knowing that she soon would have Evelyn's complete trust. 2. Daphne Wentworth. With Daphne, Morgan knew she had to tread carefully. Daphne was younger, more attuned to the world of social media, and less impressed by traditional forms of flattery. But Morgan had a knack for reading people, and she quickly adapted her approach. She began by following Daphne on Instagram, liking and commenting on her posts with just the right balance of enthusiasm and subtlety. Her comments were always thoughtful, never overbearing. When Daphne posted about a charity event, Morgan would make a small donation and mention it casually in the comments. When Daphne shared a picture from her travels, Morgan would comment on the beauty of the place, sometimes even suggesting a local spot she had read about. Daphne noticed. Over time, she started responding to Morgan's comments, sometimes even tagging her in posts. Their online interactions became more frequent, with Daphne occasionally sliding into Morgan's DMs to share a laugh or a quick update. Morgan played it cool, always responsive but never pushy, letting Daphne set the pace. The connection was growing, and Daphne began to see Morgan as more than just an acquaintance. She was becoming a friend. 3. Emma Clark. Emma was the most accessible of the three, always on the move and always looking for new ideas. Morgan capitalized on this by keeping their conversations lively and full of energy. She sent Emma articles about emerging fashion trends, forwarded invites to exclusive events, and even suggested collaborations between Opal and Ivy and other brands she had connections with. They exchanged texts regularly, Emma often sending pictures from fashion shows or sneak peeks of new designs. Morgan responded with enthusiasm, sometimes adding her own ideas or insights. And in turn, Morgan showcased her clothes on Instagram and wrote a glowing piece about Emma on the Teeny. Their relationship quickly evolved into one of mutual respect. Emma began to see Morgan as a creative partner, someone who could help elevate Opal and Ivy's brand in new and innovative ways. The fact that Morgan was well connected in the entertainment industry didn't hurt either. Emma began inviting Morgan to events, introducing her to designers, and even discussing potential collaborations. But this was just the beginning. The web she was weaving was intricate and complex, designed to catch not just these women, but the entire world she had longed to be part of. And with each step, each carefully crafted interaction, Morgan Smith was steadily climbing toward her ultimate goal. By November, the weather had turned crisp, and Morgan was eagerly checking her messages when she received a text from Emma. The message was brief, but exhilarating. "Hey Morgan, I have an exciting opportunity for us. I'd love for you to be my +1 at the Vogue Fashion Awards this year. It's going to be an amazing event, and I think it'll be a great chance for us to celebrate and network. Let me know if you're up for it." Morgan's heart raced with excitement. The Vogue Fashion Awards were a prestigious event, a glittering night of fashion and celebrity that could potentially open doors for her own career. She couldn't believe Emma had invited her to such a high-profile occasion. She quickly typed back a response, her fingers moving eagerly across the screen. "Hi, Emma. I would be absolutely thrilled to attend the Vogue Fashion Awards with you. Thank you so much for the invitation." "I'm really looking forward to it." Morgan couldn't wait. The opportunity to attend such a glamorous event alongside Emma was not just an honour, it was a chance to make connections and further solidify her place in the fashion world. As the date approached, Morgan prepared herself for the evening with anticipation and excitement. She knew this was more than just a night out. It was a significant step towards achieving her dreams. Morgan's excitement was palpable as she boarded the sleek private plane, her heart fluttering with anticipation. She had never flown in such luxury before, and the experience was everything she had imagined. The plush leather seats, the elegant decor, and the attentive staff made her feel like she was living a dream. Emma, always impeccably stylish, greeted her with a warm smile. "Welcome aboard. I hope you're ready for an amazing night." Morgan beamed, her eyes wide with wonder. "This is incredible. I've never been on a private plane before," Emma chuckled. "Well, this is Alejandro's plane. He's the one who made this trip possible," Morgan nodded, making a mental note. Alejandro, who'd been seen with Viscountess Victoria's sister Rose in New York a year ago, was now dating someone else, and Alejandro and Emma were now an item. Morgan was more focused on the present opportunity. The fact that Alejandro was involved only added another layer of connection to the high society circle she was aiming to break into. As the plane ascended smoothly into the sky, Morgan took a moment to reflect on her journey. The past few months had been a whirlwind of success, and now she was on the verge of a major breakthrough. The Vogue Fashion Awards were not just a glamorous event, they were a chance to solidify her place among the elite and showcase her growing influence. Emma's assistant brought out refreshments, and Morgan savoured the moment, sipping champagne and chatting excitedly about the upcoming event. Emma was enthusiastic, sharing details about the awards and the people they would encounter. Morgan listened intently, soaking up every bit of information that could help her navigate the evening and make the most of her opportunity. Los Angeles welcomed them with its characteristic glow, neon lights, palm trees swaying in the balmy night breeze, and the buzz of a city that never truly slept. As Morgan and Emma arrived at the opulent five-star hotel, their luggage was whisked away by attentive staff, and the lobby's grandeur offered a taste of the high life they were about to dive into. Emma, glancing around with a satisfied smile, turned to Morgan. "Welcome to LA. It's always nice to be back in the city. Are you excited?" Morgan returned Emma's smile, but there was a flicker of something deeper in her eyes. "You know, I'm actually from LA, she said, her voice softening. "It's kind of surreal being back here." Emma raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "Really? Tell me more." As they walked towards the check-in desk, Morgan began to share her story. "I grew up here, in the middle of the industry. My dad was a cameraman for TV shows and movies. I spent my childhood on sets, always watching but never really part of the action." Emma listened intently, but there was a pause as they checked in. "After reaching their suite," Morgan continued, "it was kind of magical, but also really tough," Morgan said, her voice taking on a wistful tone. "I was always in the background, never quite fitting in with the other kids. My dad's job meant long hours, and I often felt like I was just an afterthought. Being on set was exciting, but it also made me feel like I was just a spectator in my own life." Emma nodded sympathetically, her gaze focused on Morgan. "That sounds really challenging." Morgan took a deep breath, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "When I was a teenager, my parents divorced. It was a huge blow. I felt like everything I knew was falling apart. Acting became my escape. It was a way to build confidence and prove to myself that I was more than just a kid on the sidelines. But it wasn't always easy. The industry can be so tough, so demanding. It built me up, but it also tore me down at times." Emma's expression softened further, and she took a step closer, offering Morgan a supportive presence. "That must have been incredibly hard. You've been through so much." Morgan's voice quivered as she continued. "I vowed to build a successful life and create a happy home for my future children. I wanted to make sure they would have stability and love, something I felt I lacked growing up. It's been a long journey, but every step has been worth it." Emma reached out, placing a comforting hand on Morgan's arm. "I admire your strength and resilience. It's clear that you've worked incredibly hard to get where you are, and I'm so glad you're here now." Morgan wiped away a tear, managing a grateful smile. "Thank you, Emma. It means a lot to me to be able to share this with you. Being in the industry is so tough, you rarely form genuine connections with anyone. Emma's demeanour had shifted from casual camaraderie to a deeper, more empathetic connection. Right where Morgan wanted her. Emma had chosen a daring short red dress with long sleeves for Morgan, designed to make a statement. As they prepared for the awards, Morgan admired the dress. Its shimmering fabric and bold cut were exactly what she needed to stand out in a crowd of fashion icons. "Are you ready for this?" Emma asked, her eyes sparkling with excitement. Morgan took a deep breath and smiled. "Absolutely. I can't wait to see what tonight brings." Arriving at the venue, Morgan stepped out of the car and onto the red carpet, her red glittery mini dress catching every camera flash. The gown was a showstopper. Its vibrant hue and sparkling fabric ensured that she stood out in the crowd. The atmosphere was electric, with photographers snapping away and reporters vying for a moment of attention with the stars. Morgan smiled and waved, every step deliberate and poised. She could feel the energy of the night, people admiring her dress, the murmurs of appreciation for opal and ivy, and the palpable excitement in the air. Emma, radiant in her elegant black top and pants, walked beside Morgan with a confident stride. Inside the venue, the space was a vision of opulence. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling, casting a warm glow over the elegantly dressed crowd. The scent of expensive perfume mingled with the aroma of gourmet hors d'oeuvre. Morgan and Emma made their way to their seats, passing by some of the biggest names in the fashion industry, exchanging polite nods and smiles. The ceremony was a glittering display of style and sophistication. Morgan, sitting beside Emma, was enthralled by the evening's performances and presentations. Every moment was a spectacle. Celebrities accepting awards, designers sharing their visions, and the atmosphere crackling with energy. As the awards ceremony unfolded, Morgan revelled in the glamour and energy of the event. She knew that her hard work was paying off, and that this night was a significant milestone in her journey. But for Morgan, the real excitement lay in what came after. The awards ceremony concluded, and the crowd began to move toward the after-party. Emma's face lit up with anticipation. "This is where the real fun begins," she said, leading Morgan to a separate venue, a chic rooftop lounge with panoramic views of the city. The after-party was even more luxurious than the ceremony. The space was adorned with elaborate floral arrangements, and the music was a pulsating mix of modern beats and classic tunes. Guests mingled with glasses of champagne in hand, and the atmosphere was electric. Morgan felt like she was floating on a cloud of sophistication and glamour. Emma guided Morgan through the crowd, introducing her to a series of influential figures. As the night progressed, Morgan found herself in conversation with a charming and wealthy investor named Adrian. His suave demeanour and easy charm were complemented by his impressive resume in the world of luxury real estate. Morgan knew she needed to be at her best. "I must say, your dress is absolutely stunning," Adrian remarked, his gaze lingering appreciatively. "Opal and ivy has really outdone itself." Morgan's heart skipped a beat. Adrian was everything Rick wasn't: sophisticated, polished, and effortlessly charming. "Oh, thank you so much," she said back. "You really know how to make a girl blush." Adrian's gaze lingered on her, a playful glint in his eyes. "I'm glad to hear that. I was wondering if you'd do me the honour of dancing with me. I promise I won't step on your toes." Morgan's smile widened, her heart racing at the thought of dancing with him. "I'd love to," she replied, her voice warm and inviting. He extended his hand, and Morgan took it, feeling the strength and assurance in his touch. Adrian led her to the centre of the dance floor, where the music shifted to a smooth, seductive melody. The lights dimmed slightly, adding an intimate glow to the space. As they began to dance, Adrian's hand rested comfortably on the small of Morgan's back, pulling her close. The rhythm of the music seemed to sync perfectly with their movements, and Morgan found herself lost in the moment, the world beyond the dance floor fading away. "You look so beautiful, Morgan," Adrian said, his voice low and full of admiration. "The dress, the sparkle, it all suits you perfectly." Morgan's smile widened, her cheeks flushing slightly from the compliment. "Thank you, Adrian. I was hoping it would make an impression." Adrian's gaze was intense, but there was a softness to it that made Morgan's heart flutter. "Well, it definitely has. You're not just beautiful, you're captivating." Morgan chuckled softly, leaning in slightly. "You're quite the charmer, aren't you?" He grinned, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "Only when I'm speaking the truth. I've enjoyed our conversation tonight more than you might know." As they continued to dance, Morgan couldn't help but compare Adrian to Rick. Where Rick had become a predictable constant, Adrian was a breath of fresh air. He was engaging, attentive, and exuded an aura of sophistication that she found irresistibly attractive. Everything about him felt right, his presence, his conversation, the way he held her close. It was a stark contrast to the complacency she felt in her relationship with Rick. As the song reached its crescendo, Adrian leaned in slightly, his breath warm against her ear. "You're a fascinating woman, Morgan. I'd love to get to know you better, outside of these dazzling events." Morgan's heart skipped a beat. She knew the significance of Adrian's words. This was more than just flirtation. It was a potential step toward the connections and opportunities she had been seeking. She looked up at him, her expression both playful and sincere. "I'd like that too, Adrian. I think we could have a lot to talk about." The music gradually faded, but the two remained in their embrace, savouring the moment. As they finally pulled apart, Adrian's hand lingered on Morgan's, a silent promise of future encounters. "Shall we get another drink?" Adrian suggested, his tone both casual and inviting. Morgan nodded, her heart light with excitement. "Yes, let's." They walked towards the bar, their fingers brushing against each other in a way that felt both intimate and promising. The night was still young, and Morgan was ready to make the most of it. With Adrian by her side, she felt a renewed sense of possibility, and the future seemed brighter than ever. As they reached the bar, Morgan glanced around at the bustling party, her mind already spinning with the potential of this new connection. Adrian was everything she had been looking for, and tonight was just the beginning. The after-party buzzed around them, a sea of glamorous faces and lively chatter. Morgan and Adrian stood at the bar, each with a fresh drink in hand. The night had already been magical, and Morgan felt the warmth of the evening's success washing over her. As they sipped their drinks, the conversation flowed effortlessly, touching on everything from travel to art to the intricacies of fashion. Adrian's gaze was steady, his interest in Morgan evident. He leaned in slightly, lowering his voice to a conspiratorial tone. "You know, Morgan, I was thinking, this night's been incredible, but it doesn't have to end here." Morgan tilted her head, curiosity piqued. "Oh? What did you have in mind?" Adrian smiled, a mischievous glint in his eyes. "How do you feel about grabbing dinner? I know a place that's still open, if you're up for it." Morgan's interest was immediately piqued. "Dinner sounds great, but it's getting late. Where could we possibly get a table?" Adrian's smile widened, his tone casual but confident. "How does Le Jardin des Rives sound?" Morgan's heart nearly stopped. Le Jardin des Rives was more than just a restaurant, it was a legend in Los Angeles. Known for its exclusivity and Michelin-starred cuisine, it was a place where Hollywood's elite dined, a restaurant so notoriously difficult to get into that most people only dreamed of stepping inside. She stared at Adrian, momentarily speechless. "Le Jardin des Rêves? Are you serious?" "That's impossible to get into." Adrian chuckled, clearly enjoying her reaction. Not so impossible when you know the right people. I happen to have a standing reservation. What do you say? Morgan's mind raced. This was an opportunity she couldn't pass up, a chance to experience something extraordinary, and with a man who seemed capable of opening doors she hadn't even known existed. She flashed him a smile, her excitement barely contained. I'd say yes, absolutely. Adrian's grin was infectious. Perfect. Let's get out of here then. Within minutes, they were slipping out of the after-party and into the back seat of a sleek black car that Adrian had arranged. The city lights blurred by as they drove, the anticipation building with each passing moment. Morgan could hardly believe it. Le Jardin des Rêves. It was a place that had always seemed so far beyond her reach, and now she was on her way there, with Adrian by her side. She sent a quick text to Emma, who replied with a wink emoji. As the car pulled up to the discreet entrance of the restaurant, Morgan's breath caught in her throat. The exterior was understated, almost hidden, with only a small, elegant sign marking its presence. A valet swiftly opened the door, and Adrian stepped out first, offering his hand to Morgan. Welcome to Le Jardin des Rêves, he said with a charming smile. Morgan took his hand, stepping out of the car and into a world she had only imagined in her dreams. The interior of the restaurant was just as she had heard, luxurious yet intimate, with soft lighting, plush seating, and a distinct sense of exclusivity. Every detail was impeccable, from the carefully arranged floral displays to the hushed, attentive service. They were led to a secluded table near the back, where the ambience was quieter, more private. As they settled into their seats, Morgan took a moment to absorb her surroundings, feeling the weight of the evening's significance. This was it. This was the kind of life she had been striving for, the kind of place where deals were made, where futures were crafted. Adrian watched her with a knowing smile. You're taking it all in, I see. Morgan nodded, her voice tinged with awe. This place is incredible. I've heard about it, but I never thought I'd actually be here. Adrian leaned back in his chair, his eyes fixed on her. I'm glad you're here with me. I had a feeling you'd appreciate it. As the sommelier approached to offer a selection of wines, Morgan felt a sense of giddiness wash over her. This was a moment she would savour, a memory she would hold on to as a symbol of how far she had come. But tonight was more than just about savouring a rare culinary experience. It was about seizing an opportunity. Adrian raised his glass, his eyes warm and inviting. To a perfect night, he said. Morgan smiled, clinking her glass against his. To a perfect night. After they took their sips, he leaned forward, his eyes fixed on her. So, Morgan, tell me about yourself. What drives you? Morgan met his gaze, knowing this was her moment to draw him in. She set the menu down and smiled softly. Well, I've been in the industry for a while now, but it hasn't always been easy. My father was a cameraman, so I grew up on sets. It's a world I've always known, but it's also one that can be unforgiving. Adrian nodded, encouraging her to continue. That sounds tough. What was it like growing up in that environment? Morgan sighed, allowing a hint of vulnerability to show. It was hard, honestly. My dad was always working, and my mom tried her best, but they ended up divorcing when I was a teenager. Being around Hollywood, seeing all that glamour up close, it made me want to be part of it, but it also made me realise how cutthroat it can be. I've had to fight for every opportunity. It wasn't easy. My mum struggled to keep things together, and I had to grow up fast. I wanted to be an actress, to make a name for myself, but it felt like every door was slammed in my face. The industry can be brutal, especially for someone like me who didn't have the right connections. Adrian's expression softened with sympathy. That must have been rough, especially when you were so young, Morgan nodded. her voice tinged with a carefully crafted sadness. It was. And even now, with the roles I've landed, it feels like I'm constantly having to prove myself. Sometimes, I just wish things could be fair. That for once, I could get a break without having to fight tooth and nail for it. She paused, letting the weight of her words hang in the air, before adding, I just want a chance to build something lasting, something meaningful, without having to struggle so much. Adrian reached across the table, gently taking her hand in his. You deserve that, Morgan. You've worked so hard, and it's clear you've had to overcome so much. Someone like you deserves to be treated like a queen. Morgan looked up at him, her heart fluttering at his words. There was a sincerity in his voice that caught her off guard, and for a moment she felt herself genuinely touched. But she quickly reminded herself of the game she was playing. Adrian was everything Rick wasn't. He was powerful, influential, and he saw her the way she wanted to be seen. You're too kind, Adrian, she said softly, her fingers lightly brushing his. But I guess that's part of what drives me. I've always wanted to prove that I'm more than just the girl from a broken home or the actress struggling to make it. I want to create a life where I'm in control, where I can be proud of what I've built. Adrian's eyes never left hers, and she could see that he was hooked. I can see that in you, Morgan. You're strong, determined, and you know what you want. That's rare. And it's exactly why you shouldn't have to fight so hard. You should have someone who supports you, who sees your worth without you having to prove it. Morgan felt a warmth spread through her at his words. It was what she wanted to hear, what she needed to hear. Adrian was different. He was offering her a glimpse of the life she had always dreamed of, where she didn't have to struggle, where she could be treated with the respect and admiration she craved. I appreciate that, Adrian, she said, her voice softening. I really do. It's just nice to finally meet someone who understands. Adrian smiled, his hand still holding hers. I'm glad we met, Morgan. I think we could be good for each other. Morgan returned his smile, her heart fluttering with excitement. I think so too. The first course arrived with an air of understated grandeur, the oysters glistening under the restaurant's soft candlelight, each shell cradling a dollop of caviar and a drizzle of champagne mignonette. The sight alone was enough to make anyone's mouth water, and Adrian's eyes twinkled as he looked across the table at Morgan. You're in for a treat, Adrian said, his grin wide as he noted her gaze fixed on the dish. Morgan offered a shy smile, carefully crafted to appear both genuine and slightly hesitant. She knew exactly what she was doing. I have to confess, I've never actually had oysters before. Adrian's eyebrows shot up in surprise. Never? He leaned forward, clearly delighted. Morgan bit her lower lip, as if uncertain, playing the role of the novice perfectly. I've heard so much about them, but I've always been a little intimidated. Adrian's grin widened, the thrill of teaching her something new clearly exciting him. No need to be intimidated. They're a delicacy, and once you get the hang of it, you'll see why they're so revered. He picked up an oyster, demonstrating with ease. You just loosen it a bit with the fork, then bring the shell to your lips, tip it back, and let the oyster slide in. It's all about the texture and the taste of the sea. Morgan followed his instructions, lifting the oyster carefully and mimicking his actions. She made sure to hesitate just a bit, letting Adrian enjoy his role as the guide. As she tipped the oyster into her mouth, she closed her eyes, allowing the briny flavour to wash over her tongue. When she opened her eyes, she saw Adrian watching her intently, his smile full of warmth. Well, what do you think? She smiled back, playing up her response. It's different, but I like it. It's fresh, and the champagne mignonette adds such a nice touch. Adrian laughed softly, clearly pleased. That's exactly right. I knew you'd appreciate it. They continued through the meal, with each course more exquisite than the last. The white asparagus velouté was next, the truffle foam adding a luxurious depth that made Morgan inwardly marvel at the culinary art before her, but outwardly she remained composed, sipping the well-paired Chardonnay with a soft murmur of approval. Adrian watched her with admiration as they moved on to the pan-seared scallops, the tangy lemon beurre blanc and creamy saffron risotto, a perfect balance of flavours. "You have a refined palate, Morgan. I'm impressed." She let out a light laugh, playing the role of the modest yet eager student. "I'm just lucky to be learning from someone with such impeccable taste." As the Wagyu beef tenderloin arrived, accompanied by a rich red wine reduction and roasted root vegetables, Morgan knew she was winning him over. Each bite was a calculated move, each compliment perfectly timed. Adrian was captivated, his charm only growing as they shared stories and laughter over the meal. Finally, the dessert arrived, a decadent chocolate fondant with raspberry coulis and a touch of gold leaf. Morgan couldn't help but let her eyes widen in genuine delight. "This is almost too beautiful to eat," Adrian chuckled, his gaze softening as he looked at her. "But you must. It's the perfect ending to a perfect meal." She picked up her fork, slicing into the fondant to reveal the molten centre, which oozed out like liquid gold. As she took a bite, she allowed herself a moment of indulgence, savouring the rich chocolate and tangy raspberry before letting out a contented sigh. "This," she said, her voice tinged with a mixture of gratitude and wonder, "has been one of the best nights of my life." Adrian reached across the table, taking her hand in his. "And it's only just the beginning, Morgan." She smiled, feeling the warmth of his hand in hers, but also the satisfaction of knowing that her carefully crafted act had paid off. Adrian was falling for her, charmed by her supposed innocence and her story of overcoming adversity. What he didn't know was that every moment, every reaction, had been meticulously planned to draw him in. As they finished the meal and the waiter brought the check, Adrian insisted on paying, brushing off her half-hearted protest. "Consider it my pleasure," he said with a grin. Morgan's smile never wavered as they left the restaurant. The night air was cool, but she felt a warmth inside, knowing that tonight had been a success. Adrian had been charmed by her, just as she intended. She had played her part perfectly, setting the stage for whatever came next. Morgan awoke to the soft glow of morning sunlight streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows, casting a warm, golden light across the room. The bed she lay in was the epitome of luxury, plush, with high-thread count sheets that felt like silk against her skin. For a moment, she stayed still, savouring the sensation of waking up in a place like this. Adrian's mansion in the Hollywood Hills was more magnificent than anything she'd ever experienced, and the reality of it all made her heart flutter with excitement. She could hear the faint sound of music drifting through the halls, upbeat but not too loud, and the unmistakable clatter of someone cooking in the kitchen. The scent of freshly brewed coffee and something delicious frying in butter wafted in, making her stomach growl in anticipation. Sitting up, she glanced around the room, taking in the understated elegance of her surroundings. Everything was tastefully designed, with modern art on the walls and expensive-looking furniture placed just so. The view outside was breathtaking. Los Angeles sprawled out beneath her, a city of endless possibilities, shimmering in the morning light. This, she thought, is what life should be like. She quickly freshened up, slipping into one of Adrian's crisp white shirts she found draped over a chair. It was oversized on her petite frame, but she liked the way it felt, the fabric cool and soft against her skin. She took a deep breath, calming the excitement that threatened to bubble over. She had to play it cool, as always. No pictures, no Instagram stories, no hints of where she was. Discretion was key, As she made her way down the hallway toward the kitchen, the music grew louder, some smooth jazz tune that set a relaxed, indulgent mood. When she turned the corner, she saw Adrian standing at the marble kitchen island, back to her, dressed in a casual but expensive-looking outfit. He was talking to someone she couldn't see yet, but the spread on the table caught her eye first. It was a feast fit for royalty. Freshly squeezed orange juice, a variety of pastries still warm from the oven, smoked salmon with capers and cream cheese, and fluffy scrambled eggs topped with shavings of black truffle. There were also bowls of fresh berries, artisanal cheeses, and what looked like a perfectly cooked steak. Beside it was a bottle of Dom Perignon, the private chef, a middle-aged man with an air of quiet competence, was just finishing plating something else. Adrian turned around as she approached, a broad smile spreading across his face when he saw her. "Good morning, beautiful," he said, his voice smooth and warm. "Good morning," she replied, giving him a playful smile as she padded barefoot into the kitchen. "This all looks incredible, only the best," Adrian said with a wink, pulling out a chair for her at the island. "I figured after last night we needed something special to start the day. I hope you're hungry." "I am," she said, genuinely eager to dive into the spread. But more than the food, she was thrilled by the fact that Adrian had arranged all this. He was showing her just a glimpse of what her life could be like if she played her cards right. She sat down, and Adrian poured her a glass of freshly squeezed juice, his hand brushing hers as he handed it to her. There was a sense of intimacy in the gesture, and she couldn't help but feel a rush of satisfaction. He was already treating her like someone important. The private chef, having finished his work, gave Adrian a respectful nod before discreetly leaving the room. It was just the two of them now, with the entire spread laid out before them. Morgan reached for a croissant, tearing off a piece and savouring the buttery, flaky perfection as Adrian served her some eggs and salmon. "This is amazing," she said between bites, her eyes sparkling with genuine delight. "You really know how to start the day off right." Adrian leaned back in his chair, looking pleased with himself. "I like to think so, and I'm glad you're enjoying it." "There's nothing I wouldn't do to make sure you're happy, Morgan." His words sent a thrill through her, and she knew she was on the right track. She took another bite, playing the part of the woman who was completely swept off her feet. "You're really spoiling me," she said with a soft laugh, "but I could get used to this." Adrian reached across the table, taking her hand in his. "Good," he said, his eyes locking onto hers with a promise of more to come. "Because I intend to spoil you a lot more." They lingered over breakfast, the conversation easy and filled with light banter. Adrian was charming, attentive, and clearly smitten, and Morgan knew exactly how to keep him wrapped around her finger. She told him stories about growing up in Los Angeles, carefully curated anecdotes that painted her as the girl who had overcome so much to get where she was. It was all part of her strategy, to make him feel connected to her, to see her as someone who deserved all the luxury and care he could provide. When breakfast was over, and they were sipping the last of their coffee, Adrian's phone buzzed on the table. He glanced at it briefly before putting it back down. "I have a meeting later today, but I'll have my driver take you back to your hotel. I'll call you soon, and we'll do something even better next time." Morgan's heart skipped a beat at the mention of a next time. She smiled, leaning in to give him a lingering kiss on the cheek. "I'd love that." He stood up, motioning for her to follow him. "Let me get the driver sorted for you." A few minutes later, Morgan found herself being escorted out of the mansion by a courteous chauffeur who opened the door of a sleek black car for her. As she slid into the plush leather seat, she glanced back at the house, feeling a rush of satisfaction. She was on the right path, and she knew it. The car pulled away, heading down the winding road that led back to her hotel. Morgan leaned back, her mind already working on the next steps. She'd have to be careful with Adrian, play it slow, make him want her more. But for now, she allowed herself to bask in the triumph of the morning. She had just spent the night in a mansion overlooking Los Angeles, had been treated to a breakfast most people could only dream of, and now she was being chauffeured back to her five-star hotel. This was the life she had always wanted, and she was determined to keep climbing until she had it all. Morgan stepped out of the sleek black car, her heels clicking on the polished marble driveway of the five-star hotel. The doorman greeted her with a polite nod, and she returned the gesture, her mind still buzzing with the events of the morning. As she made her way through the grand lobby, she couldn't help but feel a rush of satisfaction. Everything was falling into place, and she was on the path to something truly spectacular. The elevator ride up to her suite was swift, and as soon as she entered her room, she kicked off her heels and headed straight for the bathroom. The luxurious space was a sanctuary, marble tiles, a deep soaking tub, and a rainfall shower head that promised a rejuvenating experience. Morgan turned on the shower, letting the hot water steam up the room as she undressed. Stepping under the warm spray, she let the water wash away the remnants of the night before. Her skin tingled as she lathered herself with the hotel's signature body wash, the scent of jasmine and sandalwood filling the air. She closed her eyes, replaying the morning in her mind. Adrian's mansion, the lavish breakfast, the way he looked at her like she was the only woman in the world. It was everything she had dreamed of, and more. After the shower, Morgan wrapped herself in a plush white towel and padded over to the mirror. She looked at her reflection, noting the flush of excitement on her cheeks. With a satisfied smile, she dried her hair and slipped into a silk robe before heading out of her room. Emma's suite was just down the hall, and Morgan knocked lightly on the door, her excitement bubbling just beneath the surface. When Emma opened the door, she was already dressed in a chic lounge set, her hair perfectly styled despite the early hour. "Morgan?" Emma greeted her with a wide grin, stepping aside to let her in. "You're glowing. Come in, tell me everything," Morgan laughed, feeling a surge of giddiness as she entered the room. Emma's suite was just as luxurious as hers, with a view overlooking the city and a spread of breakfast pastries and coffee on the table. "You're not going to believe the night I had," Morgan said, plopping down on the plush couch. Emma's eyes sparkled with curiosity as she poured them both a cup of coffee. "I've been dying to hear about it. You disappeared after the after-party, and I thought something big must have happened." Morgan took a sip of the coffee, savouring the rich flavour before she began. "It was amazing, Emma. After the party, Adrian asked me to dinner at that restaurant." Emma's jaw dropped, and she nearly spilled her coffee. "You're kidding. How did you even get in?" "It's impossible to get a table there." Morgan leaned in, lowering her voice like they were two teenagers sharing a secret. "Adrian made a call, and just like that, we were in. It was incredible, the most luxurious dining experience I've ever had." Emma was practically bouncing with excitement. "Tell me everything. What did you eat? What did he say?" "I want all the details." Morgan didn't hold back, recounting the 5-course meal, the way Adrian had charmed her with his conversation, and how he'd treated her like she was the only person in the room. "He's just so perfect, Emma. He's everything I've been looking for." She paused, a playful smile tugging at her lips. "And the best part? After dinner, he took me back to his mansion. You wouldn't believe how gorgeous it is. I stayed the night, and this morning he had his private chef cook us breakfast. Can you even imagine?" Emma was wide-eyed, hanging on every word. "That sounds like a dream, Morgan. You're living the life." Morgan laughed, feeling a rush of satisfaction. Emma's enthusiasm was infectious, and it felt good to share the details with someone who didn't know about Rick. There was no guilt, just the thrill of being adored and treated like a princess. "It really is, isn't it? I feel like everything is finally falling into place." Emma nodded, her expression turning serious for a moment. You deserve it, Morgan. You've worked so hard, and it's about time someone recognizes that and treats you the way you should be treated. Morgan felt a pang of something, perhaps guilt, but she quickly brushed it aside. She had worked hard, and she had overcome a lot. She was just embellishing the story for effect. Thanks, Emma. I really appreciate that. It's been a long road, and sometimes it feels like I've had to fight for every little thing. But now, I think things are finally starting to go my way. Emma leaned back, a dreamy look on her face. You're going to have to introduce me to Adrian sometime. He sounds like a keeper. Morgan smiled, already planning how she could make that introduction work in her favour. I think you'll love him. He's got this charm about him, and he's so well connected. I'm sure we'll all be seeing a lot more of each other. The two women continued to chat, swapping stories about their nights and the exciting possibilities that lay ahead. Morgan felt a thrill of exhilaration as she shared the details, knowing that every word she spoke was bringing her closer to the life she had always dreamed of. She just had to keep playing her cards right, and soon she'd have everything she wanted. After an hour of excited chatter, Morgan finally retreated to her own suite. The conversation with Emma had left her buzzing, but now she needed a moment to herself. As she sank into the plush armchair by the window, she finally reached for her phone, which had been buzzing with notifications all morning. With a deep breath, she unlocked the screen. Her heart skipped a beat as she scrolled through the dozens of alerts. Instagram, Twitter, fashion blogs, all had something to say about the Vogue Fashion Awards the night before. She had deliberately avoided checking her phone, wanting to savor the moment with Emma, but now the anticipation was too much to bear. The first post that caught her eye was from one of the biggest fashion accounts on Instagram. It was a compilation of the night's best-dressed celebrities, and there she was, Morgan Smith, in her glittering red opal and ivy dress, listed at number 8. Her breath caught in her throat as she stared at the image. There she was, standing on the red carpet, the dress catching the light just so, her smile radiant, her confidence palpable. The caption read, Morgan Smith dazzles in opal and ivy, making a bold statement with her red-hot look. A rising star on the fashion scene. She couldn't believe it. Number 8. Out of all the celebrities, all the fashion icons who had attended, she had made it to the top 10. Her hands trembled slightly as she scrolled through the comments, praise, admiration. People wanting to know more about her, where they could get the dress, who had styled her hair, what lipstick she was wearing. It was everything she had dreamed of. Finally, Morgan clicked on another notification, this one from Twitter, where her name was trending. Fashion enthusiasts were raving about her look, speculating on what she'd wear next, and tagging her in posts with screenshots from the awards. Mainstream fashion accounts were featuring her, and every retweet, every comment felt like a validation of all the hard work she'd put in. She found herself smiling, unable to wipe the grin off her face. This was it. This was what she had been working toward all these years, getting noticed, being talked about, becoming a name people recognized. For so long, she had been the girl on the sidelines, overlooked, struggling to break through. Now, finally, she was in the spotlight. Morgan set her phone down for a moment, taking it all in. The recognition she had craved for so long was finally within her grasp. The excitement of the night, the dinner with Adrian, the luxurious morning at his mansion, it all felt like a dream. But this was real. She picked up her phone again, scrolling through the endless mentions and messages. People she hadn't spoken to in years were suddenly reaching out, congratulating her, wanting to reconnect. Brands were tagging her, influencers were talking about her. She was becoming a part of the conversation in ways she had only fantasized about. Morgan clicked on another article. This one from a popular fashion magazine that had listed her as one of the breakout stars of the night. The write-up praised her for her bold choice of colour, her confident presence on the red carpet, and the way she had embraced a style that was both classic and daring. She could hardly believe it. All the planning, all the calculated moves, choosing opal and ivy, the careful curation of her image, every bit of it was paying off. She was becoming the woman she had always wanted to be, someone who was admired, envied, and, most importantly, talked about. Julia called her, her voice brimming with enthusiasm. "Morgan, you look incredible in all these photos. You're all over the place. Fashion magazines, blogs, everywhere. This is amazing." Morgan laughed, feeling a sense of achievement. "Thank you, Julia. It's surreal to see all this. I'm so grateful for the opportunity to be at the awards and to have had such a great night." Julia continued, "This is just the beginning. The buzz you've generated are fantastic. Keep riding this wave. You're really making your mark." Morgan agreed, her spirits high. She knew that this was a pivotal moment in her career. The visibility she gained from the awards was not just a fleeting triumph, it was a solid step towards becoming a mainstay in the fashion and entertainment industry. She felt more determined than ever to leverage this momentum, knowing it would open doors to more opportunities and elevate her status further. The sun was shining brightly over Los Angeles as Morgan and Emma strolled through the Grove, one of the city's most iconic shopping destinations. The open-air mall was buzzing with activity, with tourists snapping pictures of the famous fountain and locals leisurely browsing. The upscale stores. Morgan had insisted on coming here after they'd finished their luxurious breakfast at the hotel. The night before had been a whirlwind, and now that the Vogue Fashion Awards were behind them, she was eager to indulge in a little retail therapy. Besides, it was important to keep up appearances, and what better way to do that than by being seen shopping at one of LA's most popular spots? As they walked, Morgan felt a sense of satisfaction she hadn't felt in a long time. Her outfit was effortlessly chic, a pair of designer jeans that hugged her curves perfectly, a soft shirt in a pale blush pink, and oversized sunglasses that shielded her eyes from the bright California sun. She looked every bit the rising star she was starting to believe she could be. Emma, equally stylish in a flowy sundress and strappy sandals, was chattering excitedly about the different boutiques they should visit. "We have to stop by that new vintage store. I heard they have an incredible selection of bags. And there's this little jewellery shop that sells the most unique pieces. You'll love it." Morgan nodded along, but her mind was elsewhere. As they passed by the Apple store, she caught a glimpse of her reflection in the glass. Her heart swelled with pride. She looked good. No, she looked great. And she knew it. They turned the corner, heading towards the Nordstrom entrance, when Morgan heard a familiar click, click, click behind her. She didn't need to turn around to know what it was. Paparazzi. She felt a surge of excitement, mixed with a hint of adrenaline. Emma noticed too, and leaned in close. "Looks like someone's getting noticed," she whispered with a playful smile. Morgan's lips curled into a knowing smile. "Let them take their pictures," she said casually. "Might as well give them something to talk about." The two women slowed their pace slightly, making it easier for the photographers to capture the perfect shot. Morgan tilted her head just so, her sunglasses glinting in the sunlight, and flashed a subtle smile. She knew how to work the camera, even when she wasn't directly in front of it. Every movement, every expression was carefully calculated to make her look effortlessly glamorous. They continued their stroll, the paparazzi trailing behind them, snapping away. A few shoppers turned their heads, curiosity growing about the women and whispering excitedly to each other. Morgan reveled in it, the attention, the admiration, the envy. It was everything she had wanted for so long, and now it was finally happening. As they entered Nordstrom, Emma squeezed her arm. "You're a natural at this," she said with a grin. Morgan shrugged, pretending to be nonchalant, but inside she was basking in the moment. "Just another day in LA," she said, as if it were nothing out of the ordinary. But it was far from ordinary. Every click of the camera, every glance from a passerby, was proof that she was finally being noticed. She was on the cusp of something big. She could feel it. And the best part, the world was beginning to see her as the star she always knew she could be. Inside the store, they made their way through the racks of designer clothing, occasionally holding up a piece to admire or try on. Morgan was in her element, picking out items that screamed luxury and style. Emma was right beside her, offering opinions and encouragement. When they finally made their way to the checkout, Morgan couldn't resist glancing at her phone. Sure enough, there were already a few posts on social media about their shopping spree. Someone had tagged her in a photo, Morgan and Emma, walking through the Grove, looking every bit the glamorous duo. The caption read, "Spotted, Morgan Smith and Emma." Clark hitting the shops in LA. Fashion goals. She couldn't help but smile. This was just the beginning. As they left the store, shopping bags in hand, the paparazzi were still waiting outside. Morgan paused, turning slightly towards them, and gave a little wave. It was just enough to send them into a frenzy, their cameras flashing rapidly. Emma chuckled beside her. "You're really enjoying this, aren't you?" Morgan tilted her head, letting her sunglasses slide down just enough to reveal her eyes. "Why shouldn't I? This is what I've been working towards. And now it's finally happening." They walked away, the photographers still snapping away, and Morgan felt a thrill run through her. The attention, the admiration, it was addictive, and she was only just getting started. As they made their way back to the car, Morgan glanced back one last time at the cameras. This was her moment, and she wasn't going to let it slip away. She had fought too hard, waited too long. Now, it was her time to shine. Morgan disembarked from her flight with a mix of melancholy and anticipation. The moment she stepped out of the airport, the cool, crisp air of Boston hit her, a stark contrast to the warm, sunlit days she had just left behind in Los Angeles. The city's grey skies and the light drizzle added to her sense of longing for the vibrant, glamorous world she had briefly inhabited. As she arrived home, she found herself sinking into her apartment's plush couch, the silence a far cry from the bustling after-party and the lively atmosphere of the Grove. She missed Los Angeles, the buzz, the excitement, and, most of all, Adrian. The luxurious breakfast, the intimate dinner, and the way Adrian had looked at her as if she were the only person in the world. It was a heady mix of glamour and affection that she hadn't realized she craved so deeply. Morgan knew she had to quickly shift her focus back to Boston. She needed to re-establish her routines and lay the groundwork for her next moves. Her relationship with Rick had served its purpose, but she was ready for more excitement, more influence, and more status. She spent the afternoon unpacking and organizing her things, a distraction from her lingering nostalgia. As she arranged her clothes in the closet and neatly placed her new purchases on the vanity, her mind raced with plans and strategies. It was time to set things in motion. Be late afternoon, she decided it was time to address Rick. She texted him, asking if he could come by her apartment when he had a moment. When he arrived, she greeted him with a warm smile, a hint of nervousness beneath her calm exterior. "Hey, Rick," she said, her tone light and cheerful. "Thanks for coming over." "No problem," Rick replied, his voice tired but affectionate. "How was Los Angeles?" "I bet you're glad to be back." Morgan nodded, a little too enthusiastically. "It was amazing. But it's nice to be home. Listen, I wanted to talk to you about something." Rick looked at her with curiosity as they settled down at the small dining table in her apartment. He had been working late nights at La Via lately. Morgan had always admired his dedication, even if it meant their time together was often limited. "I'm thinking of spending more time in my own apartment," she began, carefully choosing her words. "I've got some extra acting work coming up, and I'll need the space to focus. You know how these things can be, lots of late nights and early mornings." Rick nodded, a slight frown crossing his face. "I understand." "Just let me know if you need anything." Morgan put on her most reassuring smile. "Absolutely. I just need a little space to concentrate, and it'll be good for me to have a dedicated spot for my work. Plus, it'll give you more room to work your late shifts without worrying about me being around." Rick seemed to accept this explanation, though there was a flicker of concern in his eyes. "Okay, if you think that's best. Just don't be a stranger, okay?" "Of course," Morgan said, reaching out to touch his hand gently. "I'll make sure we keep in touch." As Rick left, Morgan felt a pang of guilt, but she quickly pushed it aside. This was a necessary step, a part of her plan. She needed to carve out her own space to strategize her next moves, and she couldn't afford to be distracted by the constraints of their relationship. But for now, she knew she needed to focus on rebuilding her image in Boston, keeping up appearances with Rick while working on her next big opportunity. The luxury and allure of Los Angeles had shown her a glimpse of what was possible, and she wasn't about to let that slip away.